Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and this is an SSO video. This year, given the updates that we've gotten from the character update to the Hollow Woods update, in the social media spaces that I have been frequenting, including places like Tumblr and Reddit and such like that, I have been seeing this kind of argument happen that one side is going, old SSO was better, and the other side is going, if you think old SSO is better, go play something else, because and the if you think it was better, leave people have lists of other games that they think these people should play. Okay. And I want to kind of address this argument and go through, in my opinion, why old SSO was better. Note, okay, so if you come into my comments and you want to argue with me about, better graphics equal better game, I'm not going to argue back. That is a pretty, if you truly believe that, that's a pretty, shallow argument that doesn't address the rest of game design. Graphics are wallpaper. They're marketing. And I'm not going to argue if you really, really believe that the better graphics make the game better. Okay? If you strip the pretty graphics away from SSO and return all the placeholders, fundamentally, SSO is still the same game, if not a little worse, from 2017. And that's from a game mechanical design perspective. Say, okay? In my year video of 2023 in review, I've said we'd had a lot of change this year. And change is hard. People do not like change. And when you have changes coming, you can please all the people some of the time. Some of the people all of the time, but not all the people all of the time. So you're going to have people who are going to be pleased with these changes. You're going to have people who are not pleased with these changes. And sometimes there is no way to make them agree. Okay? And the community is trying to give feedback on these changes. And a massive part of the community, in my opinion, who are the vocal ones, whether they're the vocal minority, the vocal majority, whatever, they have not learned to separate hate from constructive criticism. It's become exceedingly unkind in the community. I've seen a lot more people complaining about complainers than actual complainers. I mean, I've seen people kind of come in and, before the Hollow Woods just got updated, there was a whole bunch of people who decided to take pictures of the old Hollow Woods for archival purposes. Very important. And somebody was just coming in and complaining about, how people are, saying that these old Hollow Woods were better. And I'm just looking, I'm trying to find that freaking post, and I'm going, all I'm seeing are pictures of people going, I'm going to miss this so much. I'm probably going to like the new area, but I'm going to miss this area because, this is the area I grew up on, kind of thing. All right. So, in my opinion, and I have a lot of opinions in this video, telling us OG players, the ones who have been here since 2013, 2014, to leave is the height of arrogance and entitlement. Who the hell do you think built your precious communities? This is not helpful to anybody. If you want the game to be active, if you want the game to have the same type of population issues that they were having in the servers way back in 2014 and 2015, where I can wander into the Everwind Fields, or maybe even the Forgotten Fields, in Hollowoods, without running into a group of people doing some sort of role playing, or recording something on Bandicam, and I'm going, oh, sorry, didn't mean to get in the way. Excuse me. Running some quests. See ya. It's just not helpful to say, leave, when we've been like trying to get you guys to come in and participate in the community. Like, if you guys really want to be a nice community, a kind community, we all have to learn to share. Not because, we're quote unquote better players or been here longer, but because we all share the love of the same thing. Star State. This is a game that we all love. That's our common ground here. And the ones who don't care, or the ones who have been so jaded and cynical and disappointed and angry, run out of patience and energy, they've left. And that's a lot of older players. And sometimes they've run out of patience and energy because they've been trying to explain over and over and over again what they love about this game and why they loved this game back in, 2015, and they just get drowned out by, oh, so much better now, so much better now, objectively it's better now. If you don't think it's better now, leave, go away, we don't want you here. No, I'm petty and I stick around because I don't let people tell me what to do on something I love. So, that's me. Okay, the game population is shrinking. So it's not useful to run off more players because you disagree over something as petty as art styles, or whether or not there should be an opt-out button over magical horse coats. Yes, please, I like that. As fun as it's been to flex on my bar cart in the Hollowoods, I'd like an opt-out button to sing other people's magical coats. I don't like all the magical coats. I don't want to see all of them all the time. Sometimes I just want to run around the game and not see magical coats, and just give me an opt-out button. That's fine. Sometimes I want to see the magical coats. So SSO is finding out, as I pointed out in the oh no's consequences of our actions, they can't run on shiny new players forever. Especially with the false mobile app advertising of free, and the rampant hacking happening. No, I'm not telling you how, I'm just saying it is, and it's getting a lot worse than it was. We are focusing on old Star Stable was better. Because the people who are saying this aren't actually wrong. So when we say old SSO, what we mean is pre-Mistfall SSO, pre-Johan CEO SSO, where it was Marcus Yorkin and Frederick in charge. So that's 2011 to about 2016. Now, let's be honest, the graphics were shit. The textures were heavily rasterized and looked like they'd been run through a Photoshop sharpen filter, which at one point I think they actually were, and it was painful, and they had to undo some of it. We need to go run that back through a blur filter. And the necks of the characters were way too long. The clash of the art styles could be downright jarring because we had stuff directly out of Starshine Legacy and stuff directly from the Star Stable seasonal games, mixed with newer stuff, to flesh things out. Like Moreland was newer and Fort Pinta was newer, and it just felt and looked like a 2005 asset pack that nobody quite cared enough to make it look cohesive in some aspects, like especially in the NPCs. You had the NPCs that looked, directly like the player characters, all the little race people, and then you had the NPCs from Starshine Legacy, like Herman and Dax the Tailor and the the photographer guy who's now our mailman, and I mean, Justin looked like he was, you know, supposed to be from Starshine Legacy, but he hadn't quite made it. And, you know, some of the assets have been replaced, some have been retextured and haunt us to this day. I'm looking at you, strange Johnny Birch trees, the Silverglade Castle, and the Moorland Lighthouse. Why are you still there? So we can definitively say, graphic-wise, the new Hollow Woods is objectively better. Okay? We have to ask ourselves, though, is this really the Hollow Woods, or is this a new area? This becomes the question of the issue. Instead of giving things glow-ups, SSE has been systematically making new areas and calling them old names. With the exception being Marley's. I think they did really well with Marley's, and, you know, not much of a difference. Definitely a makeover, not a do-over. I mean, I know they've redone some stuff in Fort Pinta, but we still have that old Fort Pinta texture. It gets to the point where sometimes you're running around the game and you're looking like, this has this old texture, this has this old asset, and you're like, is this something load bearing to the game? If they delete this, does the game crash? Or just have they not gotten around to it? You know, it's hard to tell. And I mean, I've had players come to me and be like, I started playing this game, you know, back when it was, you know, 2015 graphics. I didn't like them. They were ugly to me. I'm like, totally justifiable. I get where you're coming from. They were not that great. And they're like, but now when I bought the game, now that I'm an adult and can afford the game, I've been really confused. It was really confusing to me as a new player to leave Moorland and, you know, go to Jarlaheim and find all these old graphics that I remember from marketing, and I don't understand. I didn't understand, and I still don't understand why it's like this. And like, yeah, neither do the rest of us. It's been 7 years. We don't get it either. But, you know, there are artistic reasons for why we can say that old SSO was better, you know, even while the graphics were crap, they're not exactly wrong when they say they're better. Okay. First off, and I think probably the most obvious, is the color palette. Okay, older SSO was slightly more muted and had a lot more yellow. I didn't like the extreme yellow tint. Like, it definitely needed some more tonal darks to it. The muted factor, though, is much nicer. The newer graphics feel a lot more candy-coated, and like I'm working out of the bright section of a Crayola box, especially with the green. Bright colors, when put into art, and a video game is art, are meant to draw the eye so you know what is important to look at. Fort Pinta was bright yellow and on the shore, therefore it is important. We have to go there. Yes, let's go. Yay. You know, it showed us where we needed to go. And in a way, dark things can also draw the eye. So when Silverglade Castle was still the dark gray from the asset from the Star Stable seasonal games, that also drew our eye. It was dark, it was tall, it was foreboding, like, oh, what's going on there? You know, it wasn't pretty or whatever. It was, something's not right in the state of Jorvik. You know, so, you know, let's go check this forbidden castle out type of thing. Now, everything is like bright colors. And the tree trunks in Hollow are headed in the right direction and muting things down. Good job. But they don't match the rest of the tree trunks now, and we need to find some sort of happy medium. But my eyes get exhausted trying to figure out, should I be looking at the grass, the treetops, or that bright pink and purple circus tent? The circus tent is the correct answer, but because my eye is confused by the fact that the grass is bright green, the tree trunks are warm bright brown, and that the tree leaves themselves are also a bright green, I don't know, you know, I'm not necessarily going to notice that super bright pink and purple circus tent until I'm right on top of it type of thing. Okay, they are varying up their greens in the trees. Yay, good job, kudos. And I'm kind of waiting for them to like go back to the bushes and see if they change up some of the greens there so the bushes don't blend into the grass. But you know, we're getting there. I'm an artist. I'm a little petty sometimes. You know, just like, why is this bush fading into my grass? I can't see it. I don't want to run into it. But whether we like it or not, okay, people associate their emotions with colors, even things like variations in green. So if you choose to change the color of the greens, people are going to feel differently. Muted colors and olives tend to be a bit more mature, while bright and candy colors feel very childish. And then the muted colors and olives also kind of attribute to this kind of old, spooky feeling that old SSO had. Okay? A good example of colors inspiring emotions is what happened when they redid Steve's barn. It's not that Steve's barn is a horrible asset. No, it's great actually. I really like it. It's really well done. It's still confusing to me when I'm walking around it to figure out where I'm supposed to be doing my chores, but that's still me. The main issue is it is red. And we even have stuff in the games still that says Steve's yellow barn, but the barn is now red. I think that would be a really simple find and replace thing, but okay. It didn't have to be an issue though, okay? There were like 4 color options that Victor floated in his concept art. There was the yellow, there was a red, which is actually the Cape Rest color for the barn, the Baroness Racetrack blue, which is kind of like it's not a periwinkle, but it's close to that. And then, which I hope her stable is replaced with. You know, if you know she has this periwinkle kind of blue racetrack, I want the stable to be periwinkle blue to match it. And there was kind of like this nice muted jade green. And people associated Steve's farm and Steve himself with the color yellow. He's a bright and cheerful kind of guy. The yellow went well with the cut-up assets from the Orvik stables that were most of Silverglade Village at the time. And then they changed the barn to red, and people don't associate red with cheerfulness. It's a rather angry color. Or American barn red, though America doesn't have a stranglehold on the color. It's just something that, you know, lots of people in America associate barns with red. People got mad. People did get over it because, you know, in the long run, it's just a color. But people will still come out and say, Steve's barn was yellow. Steve's barn should be yellow. You know, we don't mind the red barn, but, you know, in our world, in Jorvik, the one we had for so long, for, you know, 5 years, Steve's barn was yellow. And actually, it was longer than yellow than 5 years, because I don't remember what year they changed it, but, you know, Steve's barn has been yellow a lot longer than Steve's barn has been red. Okay. So, you know, insert the Samuel L. Jackson quote about decisions. You made a decision. It was a stupid decision, and I've elected to ignore it. Now, I don't like Steve's Farm's new layout. I've heard a lot of complaints about it, too. It's cluttered to me, it's confusing, and they took out the area where people gathered near Silverglade Village to chat, and it was in global chat, and people miss it. You know, people still hang out Steve's the Flags. It's just, you know, they miss having that area to gather in the global chat to be able to, like, broadcast their advertisements or say come to Steve's or stuff like that. And I think having a house for Steve is nice. When does Barney get a house? Barney needs a house still. I think Marley has a house, but Barney doesn't have a house, and Steve has a house. When does Barney get a house? Okay. Now, secondly, and not quite as obvious probably to most people when they're running around, is scale. Okay, so color is very obvious. All you have to do is you take a find a picture of SSO from, you know, 2015, and then a picture of Moreland from today, take a picture with your picture app, and SSO, and you'll be able to tell right away that the colors are different. The bloom effect is gone, But what you might not notice quite as obviously is the scale of the assets, okay? And they have been doing better with this in some places. Things have changed, but even the new Hollow Woods isn't as tall, it's not as vertical as the old Hollow Woods. In 2015, 2016 Star Stable Online, when you were running around the trees and you were looking up, the trees were really, really tall. And you also had the canopy of the trees kind of overlapped each other or just kind of met at the edges almost, and you didn't see a lot of sky under the canopy of trees. And this was moorland, this was the Hollow Woods. This was, in Fir Grove, you could look up and, see the pine trees. Dino Valley was, okay, Dino Valley was and is kind of an example of what was old SSO. You went in there and it was creepy. I mean, creepy. It was silent. If you turn the music off, it's silent in there. And there wasn't any like animals running around, and you had all these really tall trees that were, some of them had pine on them, had greenery, but there was a bunch of dead ones. And you could hear like the wind kind of going, and the geysers. It was like really, really creepy. And there was the fog. There was more fog back then. And running around the original Star Stable, because you had this grand scale in the Greenwoods, though they've done better in Greendale in redoing it than a lot of other places, but in Greendale and in the Hollow Woods, and in Dino Valley, and definitely in Moorland, everything had a taller scale, particularly in the trees, and it didn't feel cozy. It felt like you were in an old growth forest. It felt a little jarring, a little creepy, like maybe we're not supposed to be here. And in some places, you could feel kind of odd type of thing, like kind of like a chapel thing. You go into this chapel and it's very, very tall. It's got the really tall windows and with all the light coming in, and you kind of feel, how did they do this? Oh, how beautiful. That was kind of how you could feel, the first times when you're running around in SSO. Even the Forgotten Fields, which had nothing, could kind of have this scaled feeling of, oh, that's a little spooky kind of thing. Especially once you've found the dead, sentinel tree in the huge tree trunk, and then, even running around it, and the Golden Woods could be like that. So the scale was different. And when you shrink your trees down, when you reduce your canopy, it changes the feeling of the game. I lived in San Francisco for several years, and I lived in downtown San Francisco. So in downtown San Francisco, you have all these buildings on hills. So they're only like 4 stories tall, but because they're on a hill, they seem taller. And then you go down into the business district, you had these really tall skyscrapers. No, none were taller than the Bank of America building, because they had made it so you couldn't build taller than the Bank of America building at the time. And so you were constantly in these valleys of with the buildings, okay? And they were looming over you, And sometimes it gave you kind of like this feeling of safety almost. I don't know, it's very weird. But they would loom over you. There was not always a lot of sun coming down. And I had to leave that downtown area and go to a shop in the um, middle streets, like 9th to 11th Street. The upper streets are like 19 to 23, or in the 20s, and that's a totally different area. But I was going to like these middle streets. I like lived near 3rd Street, and I had to get up to 9th or 11th Street. And I decided not to take the bus. I was just like, I'm gonna walk. It's really not that far. I'm a country girl. I can do this. So I was walking out of this area where all the buildings were looming over me into an area that was actually flat. That was kind of, what you normally think as a typical American city, American town. The buildings were still 3 to 4, whatever, but the streets were now wide enough that there was a lot of sky. And I was just, for the first time in my life, I was like, is this what being agoraphobic is like? Because it was kind of, really oppressive. So that's kind of what like being in Star Stable was like, was you would go into these forests where the trees were really tall, and even though it was kind of spooky, sometimes it could be kind of comforting, and you didn't see a lot of sky, and lots of kind of fake shade going on there. And then you would go into some place like the Forgotten Fields, and it'd be flat open, and then you suddenly had this like in the Everwind Fields, and it was like this agoraphobic feeling of, oh my god, I don't know if this is safe. So that's kind of that thought. Okay. And not having animals really did add to the creepiness factor. So not having deer wander around, no little foxes hanging out, no little squirrels crawling up and down the trees, and birds and stuff, that always adds to the creepiness factor, okay? What have you done that even the wildlife has abandoned the joint? So I'm glad they've been adding some animals, I guess. I feel like less like I'm gonna turn a corner and run into a bear or something. Shelob. I don't want to run into Shelob. Okay, especially in Dino Valley, that was one thing. There weren't any animals around. We were chasing these tracks, for the dailies, and I spent a couple hours making sure that there wasn't going to be any big animals that were going to jump out and do a jump scare, because I had a friend I was playing with at the time, and I was just like, I don't want her to get frightened, so that I would wander around, make sure I could figure out the map so we could go where we were supposed to go for the quests up there, and then also to make sure there's no, Yeti or bear that's gonna pop up and frighten us. Like, her and her horse would be running in the opposite direction. Now, post 2017, the scaling and the proportions and stuff, it's not consistent. Proportion is how things relate to each other in size. They try to scale stuff to the horse, I guess, and so this ends up with bottles like half as tall as we are, and the fences just get to me like, oh my god, the fences are scaled so badly. And so pre-2017 SSO was a little better at the proportions. I'm not going to say they were much better, but they were better, and they definitely were better on the scaling. Now, they've also taken out the bloom effect, and we can argue whether or not the bloom effect was a good thing or not. Personally, it gave me headaches because I'm farsighted and my eyes were like, I can't focus, I can't focus, I can't focus. I had to turn it off as soon as they gave me that option. But some people liked the blurry effect, and it did give like a hazy feeling to the game. So, some people liked that kind of hazy summer feeling, there's butterflies and you can hear the crickets because it's August type of thing. Okay. So let's talk about graphical consistency for a hot minute here, okay? We have established that old SSO was not good graphically, okay? The trees, they were lollipops wrapped in sheets. Everything looked grainy when it came to the rocks and the tree trunks, and the horses were a bit blocky, okay? I still love my Gen 1 Arab, though. He has so much personality. I mean, the textures of the rock houses or even Fort Pinta brick faces were and are a little strange. and they're still in the game. And some of the Gen 2 stuff, though, is really good. Like the Dews Farm in Eastern Epono. And there's a group of houses in Epono where the water rail next to the new, the Crescent Moon Village. You've got the botanist there, which we've done nothing with for years. Elizabeth Sunbeam's house is nice. That's a Gen 2 house. They look really good. OG team was headed somewhere nice, I guess. You know, Silverglade Manor, still painful. Partially architectural inconsistencies and not actual textures. Texture problems outside the glaringly white marble or stucco is they've got going here. Like that's glaringly painful, but you know. So like graphical consistency is basically when you're running around in the game, you can tell the NPCs and the player character are all the same style, and that the buildings are all the same type of graphical style, you know, and that the trees and the grass and the bushes and stuff, they all use the same building type of techniques. They were made with the same type of ways. So while we say that the trees were all bad, I mean they were lollipops. You know, they were just sheets wrapped around to make big circular shapes. You know, Hollow Woods was this way, all the trees in Moreland were this way, you know, the trees in Jarlaheim, the trees in the Golden Woods were this way. All these trees were just big ass lollipops. And it's not great graphically, but at least it was consistent. So like the trees, now we've got like inconsistent tree stuff, like and a lot of it looks very, very sparse, you know, like that downy birch tree. That's actually an original tree from the Star Stable seasonal games that they've retextured, but it still looks, you know, it looked not that great in the Star Stable seasonal games, and now it looks just as bad because it's just so sparse with the leaves rise. You know, the olive trees that need to be replaced are a different technique than the so-called weeping willow trees, I guess, that are also very sparse. And the new Hollow Woods trees are a different technique than the beech trees that we've got virtually everywhere else, you know. So you've got a beech tree and a maple tree made with the same technique, but you don't have these whatever type of tree that they're supposed to be in the Hollow Woods, because they're definitely not oak trees. They have a saw blade. They have that arrow blade shaped leaf. That's not an oak tree. So you have all these trees, and they're not being made with the same graphic technique. So it's like jarring. It is very jarring. So while the old SSO trees were terrible, let me be clear, you know, and we still have them in like that whole garden thing that they haven't fixed yet in the manor. I don't know when they're gonna fix the manor. And sometimes in certain places around like Jarlaheim, they haven't completely changed them out. At least they were all consistently bad. I mean, at least it was all consistently bad. So when I'm running around the game, because nothing fits from area to area, you know, Dino Valley is one game. The Hollow Woods are now another game. Moreland in the Fort Pinta area, that's another game. South Hoof is another game. I'm like in 3 or 4 different games here, and you know, you want to be in one game. You know, even if the new graphics are great and they're solid and they're well done, the art style needs to be one style across the newer areas and Hollow Woods, and it doesn't fit with Silverglade Village, and it doesn't fit with Mistfall and the Wedwoods, and it's all very, very weird. Like, yes, Mistfall and the Wedwoods area, those are 2 different other games. You know, it's like there's 5 or 6 games here, and we haven't figured out how to make one stylistically consistent game. Okay, so you know, the Houses of Silverglade, the new racetrack, those are great assets. They're really nice. They're solidly built, but do they really belong in Silverglade Village? No, not really. I mean, I still love some Cotswold style or some French style stone houses or something cream to match the castle. That's me. Like didn't want the whole village to be remade down to, the architecture style. I wanted to still feel like I was in Silverglade Village. And it's not that, the village is terrible, the assets are terrible. It's, I mean, the layout is confusing. I'm still not sure. I still get kind of confused. Where am I supposed to go? What am I doing? The layout is not, uh, intuitive. How about that? And it's not that they're bad assets. It's just I would rather see those assets being used, say, in Meander or in Bow Vista or Bay Ridge, where, my memories of Star Stable Spring and Star Stable Winter would make me feel like the placeholder assets that they had in those games. Those new assets, those new buildings in Silverglade would make a lot more sense in Meander, or would make a lot more sense in Bow Vista. So that's kind of like that type of feeling. I just, that doesn't make sense to me, because Silverglade Village was a take on Jorvik Stables, but as a village. And I wanted it to keep that feel. I wanted to have that glow up versus being completely remade. But okay, again, on the horses, we have a problem now that we have 3 or 4 texture styles of horses. Like, you have the Clydesdale style, the Percheron style, and the Shires and Irish Cob style. Those are 3 different texture styles. The Jorvik Wild horse has a different texture style than every other one's. But now we have a problem with the eyeballs. Okay, like, what do you mean the eyeballs? The eyeballs. Okay, so when you're looking at the horses, like, most of the Gen 3 horses and the Gen 2 horses and the Gen 1 horses had these kind of big eyeballs that were little reminiscence of anime eyes, like from Starshine Legacy, how Starshine had anime eyes. And they had these kind of leftover cartoony eyes from the old style. And, they were actually round, but you could have cut those in half to save on the polys, but, that's just me. And then they put in the new Dutch Warmbloods, and the horses having anime eyes has been tossed out the window. And now they have realistic eyes. So now we have 2, even in the same quote unquote generation of horses, we have 2 horse styles of anime eyes, much less, horse stylism. The wild horse has a different proportion and style than, the horses that are based on real life horses. And it's just like, we don't have a style guide here. So you can put all these horses together, and the Lusitanos and the Connemara's, the early Gen 3 horses and the Andalusians, they look a lot different than the Belgian Warmbloods and the Dutch Warmbloods and everything of the late Gen 3 horses. And so once again, we're playing 2 different games. And the horse style doesn't match like the kind of cartoony Fortnite style of the environment. So it's kind of just, it's very, very weird, to me, that we can't find a consistent style book. Now, was old SSO great on keeping consistent styles? No, absolutely not. And, but both of them are jarring in their own ways. But in some cases, old SSO was at least, relatively consistent on how coats were textured, on the eyeballs, on how they were doing the stylistic proportions of the horses, and on how they were actually creating the horse coat colors type of thing. You didn't have candy coated horses like candy buckskins, like the Maori buckskin in Spirit. You don't have that butterscotch coat in the older horse coats. They were all out of relatively the same color palette. Okay, so in this way, old SSO was technically a little bit more consistent in art styles than new SSO, even though new SSO is supposed to be creating this new art style and replacing all of old SSO stuff with it. But we still have 3 or 4 art styles within the new art style, and it's just like, I don't know, crazy to me. But okay, we do have to understand though that games are more than just graphics. Once again, graphics are wallpaper, graphics are marketing, and yes, graphics are going to make you feel things about the game. So, you know, like I said, the color, changing the colors is going to change the feelings of the game, people playing the game, and you know, whether or not you have the same scale, and we have consistent art style issues and art techniques. But like, and people are going to be attracted to certain types of graphics and think certain styles are pretty versus not pretty. I mean, come on. There are people who still want to play 8-bit games and listen to 8-bit music. Even though, you know, 8-bit was just such an 80s thing, there are people who still want that. Okay, so the old SSO graphics were very low in 2005, and now we're at very Barbie meets Fortnite meets Disney. Very generic. And, so this whole thing has been hurting, the graphic consistency stuff has been hurting SSO for years, and they've been at it for 6 years. It has to be done. It has to be finished, and it needs to be finished quickly. But, you know, it's more than just the graphics, because the graphics are their marketing. You know, the graphics are going to be bringing people to the game. But the game is more than graphics. It's, you know, there's mechanical stuff, but that hasn't really changed since 2017, except taking some stuff out, which makes the game worse in OG players' opinion. OG players missed the cold mechanic because that actually gave you a reason to buy cold tolerant horses, and they miss the auto slow mechanic. I don't know why we can't have a checkbox for an opt out. You know, hey, you want to do free running? Fine, here's a little checky box to turn off the auto slow, but we took it all out. You know, but another thing that a game has, you know, is a story, and when you have a story, you know, you have to come up with a genre, and you have to have some kind of genre expectations, okay? Pre-2017, okay, before Johan, before, you know, we found out there was no story team, we were kind of relying pretty heavily on Starshine Legacy to supply lore for the game, okay, which was probably not a good idea. But we also had Marcus Yorkin, and we, you know, Marcus was very much in charge of the story part of the game. Like, I guess he was very jealous of it, and he didn't want other people working on it, so he was kind of like the one-man story person, okay? And what we knew from Starshine Legacy was that there were portals and aliens and powers of the unexplained kind that kind of look like magic to us because we don't understand the technology. And, you know, we're playing through the game, and they start adding in things like P being a witch. Later they said Mrs. Holdsworth was a witch too, which was kind of confusing because that was not set up well. We had Yidris, who was an older man that, you know, ran the circus, and, you know, he had the swirling Pandoria thing near his eyeball, and it was like, okay, I'm not so sure about you, but right, okay. And they were adding in lots of references to universal monsters that were technically science fiction, you know, Frankenstein is technically part of science fiction type of thing. So it was kind of, we were teetering between science fiction and science fantasy. And they added in these magic horses, which is a bad name, really, but they had like super rare coat markings and changed colors, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, they hung out near Pandorian energy and that changed them, and that's okay. And, you know, totally acceptable. We had Mr. Anwar using drugs to turn into a monster, which is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he was using it on the horses. Sorry, spoiler alerts. And, but P was a little out of genre, and Yidris was a little out of genre, and the Einsteins made up for him. It was just mostly sci-fi, with maybe with a tiny bit of fantasy because of Clark's Law. Witches and druids could have been explained other ways, not magic. And I was like, okay, they're expanding lore. Starshine Legacy didn't really have a lot of it. We were headed towards places. They might think this is cool. Let's see what they're doing. Let's see what Marcus is doing, type of thing. And then everything post 7/2017 happened, and eventually fantasy became this byword, and now everyone in the community is trying to defend SSO because it's a fantasy game, and you can just pass all the little inconsistencies and, plot holes off of, a wizard did it. Yeah. It's like watching Xena, and you realize between takes the horse changed colors, and they're like, oh yeah, a wizard did it. Okay. But when you are an author or an artist, like say you're working on a comic book, you have to understand that genres have rules. And this does apply to video games. Genres have rules. Especially when your video game is mostly a visual novel like Star Stable is, we have little boxes. There are expectations. And you have to set up like the limitations in your setting, in your rules, in the story itself. You have to lead your audience along to know how wacky your rules are going to be, so they don't go, this is nonsense, it doesn't fit in with your game setting. And the magic horses, to me, considering that we have turned into the horse buying simulator, put in a quarter and get a horse out of it, is like this really prime example of this. I don't want to talk about the new story a lot because that's kind of spoilers, and I don't really want to do that, in case people haven't played it. But the magic horses are a really prime example of people were playing this game, okay? They had genre expectations. We had portals into other dimensions. We had Garnock as this big alien that was imprisoned, kind of in this dimension and in the Pandoria dimension, underneath Jorvik in the ocean, because, of the falling spaceship, the crashed spaceship. We had the concept that, Edine was either from an alien herself and she brought light to Jorvik, or the aliens gave the human Edine these powers through their technology to bring life to Jorvik. Very confusing there. I mean, if you take away Anne's biased interpretation, we can make 3 or 4 stories out of those murals in Starshine Legacy, Anne's portion of it in Pandoria. And, we had these expectations of 4 girls, we're going to take on Garnock, and we're going to figure out the truth of the matter. We're either going to imprison him even further, or, he's going to get free, and we're going to have this big fight, or, something, an active space is going to happen, and the aliens are going to come back. No idea. But we knew we had, we had some MacGuffins we needed to chase. We had to find the light book ceremony, and we had to, eventually we're going to have to make some sort of way to channel our powers, which Fripp gave us a magic wand. There's got to be consequences for this. We had to find these sigils to go further into Jan Jarl's tomb to find out what's hidden in Jan Jarl's tomb, because if you're a ghost and you're imprisoned at the bottom of your tomb, you have been a naughty boy. And we had these kind of genre expectations, and then the magics happened. And we had the horses that change color, and I'm like, okay, this is fine. And then we had one that was on fire, and I'm like, okay, sure, that's just another color change, I suppose. And then we progressed to the pumpkin horse. I'm like, the Pepita came out in 2019. We had the ice horse in 2018, and the fiery horse, Gallopert Thompson, and the tree horses with the bar carts. And I'm like, okay, why not? It seemed to be a natural progression, kind of fitting into the lore this far. You know, we'd been exposed to the pumpkin hunt chase and the live straw you goat. So pumpkin horse wasn't too big of a stretch, even though we hadn't been really given any type of story to in the game itself. You know, the lore boxes that they gave on the cells thing do not count. Okay, story from people interacting with NPCs, finding shit out. We hadn't really been led along in the story there, but we had been given enough stuff and other magic horses to go, okay, maybe the pumpkin horse isn't too big of a stretch in this kind of, they hung out too close to Pandorian energy. Maybe they put this pumpkin near a rift or a runestone and it turned into a horse, or this horse was hanging out in a pumpkin patch with a runestone in it and it was turned into a pumpkin, you know. And the wood here is just an extension of the book cards. So it's like, okay, I'm willing to kind of go along with this. I'm not entirely sure how this fits in with aliens and portals to other dimensions and stuff like this, but, you know, living pumpkin horse. We've got living trees, we've got living fire, we've got living ice. Alright, fine. Then things got wacky, off the rails, and we strayed completely out of science fiction and into fantasy with the dragon horses. And then we got the Hydorun, the goat horse, and the weird bird horses, which need massive design changes. And you know, the two variations of the Kelpie, because the first pastel Kelpie version didn't go over like they wanted it to, and then big fish horses and rock horses, which, okay, we were going back to something that kind of made sense, and then horses with crystals embedded into them, that looked just painful, and strange fairy wing blanket horses, and skeleton-style horses, and horses that represent the eclipse and the moon, and rainbow horses about light and shadow, and horses with antlers, and the unicorn, straight into fantasy again, which we kind of had talked about with Nick Stoneground, but we did not find the actual valley with the unicorns in it, so why are you giving us unicorns? I don't know. And then the horse is like made of gingerbread, and another icicle horse, but he's got lights on him, or in him, I guess, and not, you know. So at least the gingerbread horse is kind of like our Yule goat and the pumpkin horse, and, you know, let it slide. But I don't know about what Snow Dancer and Shadow Shield are supposed to be. You know, I've looked at their lore boxes and it's like there's some sort of Christmas spirit, and I'm like, Christmas, winter spirit? Where did this come from? There's been nothing about this in Warm Winter Witches. I have not been led along to believe that there are winter spirits running around Jorvik doing stuff. What are we talking? I have, like, where did this come from? And, you know, it just, other than, we need, you know, we've placed out the Arabians, and now we want magic Arabians, and this looks pretty. You know, some of these horses have good designs, some of them have poor designs, you know, but they're stretching the limits of belief in the genre setting of the story, and we're headed into preposterous territory because you just can't use its magic to justify everything. There needs to be reasons, and reasons need to be set up in story and not lore boxes, you know, story. Look, we had a goldfish and a lionfish exposed to Pandorian magic, and they became so big they turned into horses? Like that's ludicrous. Especially when, you know, those are both tropical fish. So at least the Goldwater is a freshwater and a pet fish, and we can pretend somebody let it out of the tank and it was like, be free! Instead of being free, it got exposed to magic and it got so big and it became, before it became invasive, and it turned into a horse. Though how it could survive an Arctic Jorvik winter, I don't know. This lack of logic when it comes to weather, I'm not going to go there in this video. And did the lionfish escape from an aquarium that we've never been to and got too close to Gardak? Is there an aquarium on Jorvik somewhere? Please explain. Using its fantasy and then throwing everything beyond the kitchen sink into the setting without actual forethought, you know, the Buttergoods are vampires and they want to eat magic horses. What? You're trying to be, you know, trying to make a quick buck, or, you know, think this is funny. It's gonna turn off players who love lore. Scott Buttergood, the vampire cryptid hunter, in a game about aliens trying to take over the world, and the alien trying to escape from another dimension. I do not know how this computes. I really don't. So you feel there's this just whole dizziness of failed genre expectations. It's satire at this point. And we've jumped the actual shark. Yes, the shark that, I don't know how there's a shark in the Arctic waters here. Maybe I need to go check on my shark, shark migration patterns. But, we've actually jumped said shark in a race. And OG players are going to say, this is not the game I paid for. I did not pay for this, like, kitchen sink fantasy thing, and it made a lot more sense back, when they first let the magics out, the concept of magic horses out, that they were just exposed to Pandorian magic and they could change colors. That seems logical, but, like, now we have vampires and yetis and druids and witches and fates and aliens and intelligent warrior cat horses and cowboys and mad science, and it's gotten exhausting because nothing fits together. You get exposed to these new concepts one right after another without having them set up in a way that makes sense. And you can try to do this mishmash of stuff, but you have to show it in your work, in the story, and not just randomly toss it in when you think it's cool, or because players demand a pretty unicorn. And it is a pretty unicorn, despite the whole Reigns situation. Look, like I said, Nick laid groundwork for unicorns and yetis, but we never got beyond Dino Valley to find the Green Valley with the unicorns. Strange. And I wouldn't be so sarcastic if Nick was doing the yeti and the unicorn stuff, because it was set up with Nick. Maybe it's not a yeti, but a big bear eating horses, and that's why Cater needs the snowy form to hide from the big bear. I would accept that too. But this whole pretty sparkle pony buying simulator where the devs do whatever they want because they think it's fantasy and a wizard did it is justification. It's not the game people paid for it back in 2012 or 2016 or early 2017. They paid for a game about 4, now 5 supposedly girls taking on a big alien thing and learning all the secrets that they didn't learn in Starshine Legacy, including, is this big thing, alien thing, actually wrong? Maybe he's just an ugly octopus creature, but some people like octopus creatures, and maybe he's actually right. So I'm not entirely sure how big fish horses fit into all this, or dragons and unicorns hiding as horses, or whatever Dorsha and Solus are, or whatever, the horses with the crystals are. I do not know how they're going to fit in this big fight against Karnak, other than the fact they're just there. And you can be like, well, new players don't know about Starshine Legacy, but players who really love the game are going to go seek out, is there more, and find Starshine Legacy, or read the books. And now we've got tutorials that are retconning the game people paid for years ago. And, it's like, so, OG players again are going to go, learning over stuff over time and unraveling the mystery of Jorvik is, how we got hooked into the game, and it's better, and please stop retconning things, and please stop telling them this stuff right off the bat. And, and they're not going to be wrong about it from an artistic, authorial point of view, okay? Telling your player, that's supposedly new to Jorvik, right off the bat, what's going on, it takes away the mystery. It makes it so most people are like, okay, I know what's going on now. I don't need to continue the story. I don't want to, I'm going to toss the book away, unless you're doing some sort of really weird, really shocking twist somewhere in the story that's not written yet. And to get, to have people, older players who have completed this quicker, no, you got to keep playing. Don't worry about that. Keep playing. There's something coming up that you don't know yet, and it's really, really cool, okay? But, I have seen opinions from players who play the new tutorials and think, they'll catch new players, but I'd like to see opinion of new players who have no idea what SSO is about before I put any kind of stock into these older players think, oh, this will make people play the game. I need to know what new players think, okay? It also really depends on the audience, which is something that Star Stable also has a problem with. Like, if you have a middle grade audience, Harry Potter, you can get away with hitting, your people over the head and just with a stick more than you can in young adult, which is more like a Twilight. And it depends on which end of middle grade or young adult you're aiming for. So stuff for 8-year-olds, written for 8-year-olds, is a lot different than stuff that's written for 11 and 12-year-olds, which is again very different for those written for 16 to 18-year-olds. So, we need to find, who are we trying to capture with our story? Are we trying to capture the 8-year-old, or are we trying to capture the 16-year-old? Oh, and the old story, the Starshine Legacy story, was kind of more for the older audience, between 12 to 16. And there is a lot of words. There are a lot of screens. So there's a lot of reading. So, younger players, unless they really, really love reading, which most don't, they're not going to want to read screens and screens and screens and screens of words when, they came in to play a game and do stuff and not read a, long visual novel that involves a lot of clicking. They want to get to the game, whereas an older audience, they're still not going to appreciate screens and screens of words, but they're going to be more likely to read the screens and screens of words and, not miss the important stuff. And all this focusing and overstuffing the beginning of the story is overwhelming and upsetting to old players who can't replay it without making a new account, which most of us don't want to do for good reasons. We've paid for this game once already. We don't want to pay for it again. This is actually like really bait and switchy and predatory on SSO's part. Published is published for a reason. Now, SSO did need new tutorials for the opening of the game to teach people how to use the new UI, but you can put in new tutorials without changing the plot of the game, okay? Now, with old SSO, when Marcus Yorkin was in charge of it, and, we were chasing after Mr. Anwar as a monster on Night Dust, who was now glowing with pretty blue stars, we were kind of like, okay, we know where we're going, and what MacGuffins we need, and what areas we've got to open up to get the MacGuffins we need. Now, we have no idea. No idea what's going on. The story update schedule kind of killed all the tension, and, they've deliberately avoided plot lines because they're like, oh, those are for level 15, 16, 20 players, and we don't care about that. That's not going to bring us new money, even though it would bring more players back and keep them in the servers, and, more time you spend in the servers is the more time you might pay more money. If, we could see that the story was going somewhere, some of us would give you more money. So drooping out content to lengthen out the whole horse buying simulator thing doesn't actually make a good game. Nor does the stripping mechanics, but, I've said that already. We've added some new mechanics, or at least some reapplications of old mechanics, and maybe sometime in the next 5 years they'll figure out how to do lunging and dressage and grounded in the actual game rather than events in the horses app. But anyway, we're supposedly getting farming of plants that we can find in the world already just by running around in January. So, maybe sometime in the next 5 years they'll figure out how to connect archaeology and fishing and farming and crafting all together into a cohesive system, and that's a lot of copium on my part. Okay. Another important thing that is very subjective, and some people will say that old music, old stuff is better versus new stuff, and other players say the new stuff is better, and is the music. Now, people really get attached to music. Music makes you feel emotions. That's what music is supposed to do. And the music from an SSO has been there a really, really long time. Like, a lot of the tracks in the original SSO were from Starshine Legacy. And yes, it was probably time for an update or a radio. The map was due for massive expansion, so new music could be used, either or. At the same time, removing the old music entirely means people aren't going to feel that same emotion every time they wander into Silverglade and hear that opening theme to Star Stable. You know, movies and video games are heavily dependent on music, or lack thereof, like in Dino Valley, to set the mood. Is one better than the other? I have no idea. I get tired of hearing things on repeat, so I shut it off like years ago. If I overplay a video game and I can't turn the music off, like Ratchet and Clank, I hear it in my sleep, and if it, and then I'm like playing Ratchet and Clank in my head, in my dreams, and all the bolts are flying at me, and no thank you. That gets really tiresome. So, yes. So old players who like the old music can go to Spotify and listen to it there, but that's like you have to have a separate program open while you're running Star Stable to listen to the music to set the mood that you want in Star Stable, and that's kind of redundant. And it's just, it's just musical taste at this point. It's kind of like colors. Sometimes it's not better than the other. It's because, it's just a color, but it makes you feel emotions, okay? And the old music made them feel like they were playing Star Stable because they associated certain, certain phrases, musical phrases with Star Stable, and because of those memories, it was better. It's like Star Wars. If you changed out the phrases and the musical phrases of Star Wars while you're watching the movie, would it still be Star Wars? Would it still be John Williams, orchestral soundtrack to Star Wars? And I want to say no. Like, you would not have that same feeling to Star Wars without John Williams' music that was, inspired by The Planet is Sweet by, it's not Grieg, it's Holt. I believe Holt's Planet is Sweet, particularly Mars for like the Empire stuff. But if you take out John Williams' music from Star Wars, it's not really Star Wars. You expect certain musical phrases and musical themes and beats at different points in the story, and that's what makes it Star Wars. Okay. So, old SSO, it was better. And even in the fact that we were getting story updates and area expansions more consistently. The summer of 2016 was like peak Star Stable story time. That was great. It was Marcus rushing to put out story before he ran out the door, I guess. But, it was like we were getting a lot of story from the South Hood area all the time. And, every year we got Jarlaheim and Cape West, and we got a Dino Valley. We got a new big area south of every single year. And, it felt like the game was going somewhere, and we had some idea of where it was going to go because of genre expectations with Garnock and, the four girls, and we're going to be in conflict now with the Druids, and we got to find these MacGuffins before the Druids do and before the Dark Riders do, and we got to solve this mystery and get to the bottom of what happened with Jan Jarl all those years ago, and, we had some sort of idea of what was going to happen, and now we don't, and now that we don't, you just kind of don't. And then there wasn't a lot of, this doesn't make sense jumping out at us, and, didn't feel constantly retconned, So whether or not the music is better, and whether or not you like the bloom effect, and whether or not you like the, the new colors versus the old colors, that's all really personal, but, color and scale and consistency of badness, they made the game feel more like a singular game, I guess. Like, using the buildings from Jorvik Stables and Silverglade Village gave us a tie to Jorvik Stables even before we unlocked it on the other side of Jarlaheim. So we had this tie back of stuff to Starshine Legacy in the seasonal games to remind us that, oh, this is Jorvik, before we even got to Jorvik Stables and met Herman again, okay? If that makes sense, okay? New SSO has prettier graphics. And an overwhelmingly amount of buy with real money horses who are there to make the company money. And profit is not a dirty word. It'd be nice if it's a little less obvious. Some of the stuff, was like trendy stuff off of TikTok and, cash grab. It's just, it doesn't mesh well together when you line them up in a row, much less make sense low-rise. And, they're adding some mechanics that aren't run around like a chicken with our head cut off. But do these mechanics really tie into the mechanics we already have? It's like we're making progress and we're working on stuff behind the scenes to make the game run better kind of progress, but it's so slow that if you looked at the game in 2017, from that 2017, and you look at the game now, most of what has changed has been the wallpaper. Okay? And SSO does need to update things. It does need to change. It's not helpful to our community of players to be a community of players, to tell fellow players to be grateful for SSO rushing things at times. And, and I say it's rushing things even though it's been years, because, the way that they're doing it, it feels rushed because of the way they're doing it, the cycle, the development cycle of how they're doing things. And it's not helpful to tell people to leave if they don't like it when anyone points out things that, that bother them, that doesn't make sense to them. And maybe they can't articulate, a artistic or authorial reason why that it bugs them, because they just don't have that vocabulary. They don't have that analytical capability. That takes work. It's hard. You have to learn that. It's not something that people automatically come with. Say the vocabulary and the ability to say, as a game dev, as an artist, as a, author, this bothers me because, you have to spend time and learn how to do that, and, learn how things work to be able to say with constructive ways, I don't like this, and when they do this, I feel this, and this is why. Okay, different things are also going to bother different people because we all have different tolerance for genre distortions and changes in general. It shows we have a diverse community that cares about the game and different aspects of the game, and they want, they want the story to be better. They want the racing system to be better. They want the graphics to be better. They want, story to come out more often. They want more things to explore, and that's, and they want it to be more accessible to people who, have colorblind, or who are colorblind, or who have disability issues with playing on, controllers and stuff. That's good. It's good to have a diverse community, because then, you have a lot of people playing the game. And people are allowed to vent on Tumblr and Reddit and Twitter because they want to feel solidarity to other fans. Not everyone plays for the story, so not everyone cares about the genre expectation. Not everyone plays for the magic horses, so they'd rather not see them, and that's okay. Not everyone has played the old games, so they might be baffled at the different theories, and that's fine. Not everyone played before 2017, so they might not understand why people think that it's better, because they don't rely only on graphics for a game to be good. We're just a big, diverse community, and be great if we could, pretend to get along and agree to disagree. Being positive all the time is just as damaging as being negative all the time. Being, I love this, I love this, I love this all the time is just as bad as, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And we have to learn to take constructive criticism, or learn to analyze our work better in order to be able to grow, or Star Stable's work better at this point. Critical thinking is a skill we all need to have, as well as media literacy, especially in this AI Web 3.0 stage of existence with deepfakes and propaganda everywhere. And just remember, propaganda is stuff to make you feel emotions. That's it. There are only a few other fandoms I can think of that seem so intent on chasing out their fellow fans. And we don't want to be like those fandoms. I mean, do we really want to be like those toxic fandoms that gatekeep and try to chase people out, over silly little theories? Let's not chase people out because we think Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord, okay? Some people like Jar Jar Binks and some people don't. And that's okay. So, I hope we can kind of get on the same page here about the OG players saying that pre-2017 was better. They're not necessarily talking about the wallpaper of the graphics. I think we can all agree that the graphics were kind of shit. But we liked the color of the graphics. We liked the scale of the graphics. We liked the bad consistency of the graphics. But they're talking like the vibes and the scale and how the story came out and how often it came out and the story fitting what they expected doing to playing Starshine Legacy. That, they bought a game so that they could continue the story of the Star Riders versus Garnak. Or maybe, finding out Garnak is actually not all that wrong, and maybe that imprisoning him forever is a bad idea. Maybe if the horse aliens didn't rewrote history here to make themselves out to be the good guys. We don't know. And it's not bad to have those opinions. So let's not chase each other around going, get out of my paddock, get out of my paddock, because then the game's gonna be emptier than it already is. We want the game to be back to the point where you have groups of players hanging out in the Everwind Fields or hanging out in the Hollow Woods doing role plays and trail rides and working together in groups to work through the story quests. That's what we want. We want the game to feel be full of life. Okay? We want other people to come join us in the thing that we love to talk about and to play at Star Stable, Jorvik, versus, Pandoria and Garnak, and, what happened to the Culters? Are they ever gonna come back? We want that. We want to, be together as a community, that even though we can disagree on things, that we are still a community that loves Star Stable. And some of us might love certain portions of it better than others. Okay, so peace on Jorvik, and goodwill to all Star fans. And take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Stay safe. Bless. And unless Star Stable does something really drastic in the next 6 months, this probably will be my last Star Stable video for quite a while. Just so you know, I have lots of author tube things to talk about. Maybe some game dev things. And so if any of that interests you, I will see you in those videos.